Hello, I'm Suzanne James. Welcome to Night Shift, where we talk all things voluntary assisted dying in Australia, also known as VAD or VAD. As our regular listeners will know, the Australian Capital Territory, the ACT, now have Australia's most progressive VAD laws, which have been operating since last November. They have no fixed 12-month prognosis timeframe until death, and thankfully no GP gag clause. We'll be talking today about the recent announcement by the ACT government that they are establishing a citizens' jury to look at the question of what happens when somebody is approved for VAD but loses capacity before they are able to use it. Joining us today, both from Dying with Dignity ACT, are Dr. Adele Stevens, who's been involved in the ACT legislation since the very beginning and still sits on a number of key committees advising government, including for palliative care. Adele, welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be involved here.
Also joining us is Mr. Roy Harvey. Roy represented Dying with Dignity ACT on the ACT Health Directorate Community and Consumer Consultation Group and commissioned the survey of the ACT voter attitudes towards widening access to VAD. Roy, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Susan.
Thank you both for joining us. Both the ACT government and your organisation, DWD ACT, put out a press release last week about the citizens' jury, looking further into certain aspects of your new VAD legislation. So I'll start with you, Roy. Talk us through what exactly the government says they want to achieve with this citizens' jury, and what was your organisation's response to that?
The bad news was that they framed the role of the citizens' jury in a very narrow way. It was just to what should happen if a person loses decision-making capacity after the final stage of voluntary assisted dying. The good news is the government says the government is committed to ensuring voluntary assisted dying remains responsive to the needs of Canberrans. The second bit of good news was that they said the citizens' jury will provide recommendations to the government on how to establish a decision-making process with strong safeguards, enabling people who have expressed a clear wish to access voluntary assisted dying at the end of their lives to have their decisions upheld. I would hope the citizens' jury may actually do is refer to the relationships between the narrow terms of reference and the current Advance Care Planning laws. All states in Australia have some form of Advance Care Planning law, but at the present it really only allows people to withdraw treatment. In other words, to say, if I lose mental capacity and cannot decide what medical treatment that I want, then I no longer want to have medical treatment, life support, food and water. So it really only allows people to die a natural death, which sometimes is good, but for quite a lot of people it can be quite long and protracted and quite traumatic. But if the citizens' jury says it's okay to administer a substance to somebody who has lost capacity, then it seems no reason that a person who's making an advanced care plan to say what happens if I lose capacity shouldn't be able to say, I would like to have a VAD-like substance, so instead of having a long protracted death, I can actually die with dignity. This is actually supported by 80% of the ACT voters who wanted both wider eligibility and the power and the right to put in their Advance Care Directive that they want access to VAD.
Now, Adele, you've sat on more of these government committees than most of us. In the absence of a terms of reference, what's your view of what the citizens' jury might most likely look at in detail, and what do you see it achieving? How do you think it's going to go?
Okay. The first thing is how is it going to be set up? And what has happened previously in citizens' juries is they've created a steering committee, and in this case, I see it would have to be consumers, patients, carers, clinical people and legal, because they're the people that they think should be on this citizens' jury. And the aim of that group would be to develop the questions and some scenarios to put to the wider jury once it's created. Our group, Dying with Dignity ACT, has written to the Minister, to Tara Chain, to say we would asking something along the lines of how's this going to happen. We would like to have some input into the creation of this body.
At the moment this citizens' jury into VAD in the ACT was announced, as soon as they said they were going to look at loss of capacity and VAD being reviewed, advocates like myself were inundated with people wanting to know if it might solve the vexing issue of being able to include voluntary assisted dying in Advance Care Directives, especially for people with dementia, which we'll talk about in more detail in a moment. But before we get to that, Adele, there's lots of other diagnoses, aren't there, that this could impact? Given you're a palliative care advocate, what are the kinds of patients you think might also benefit from the ability to make any sort of preemptive request?
Right. I mean, there's a whole stack of people. Just looking at the issue of the being proposed, like someone started the process for accessing VAD and they've got their 2 permissions, but they haven't reached the end, which was what that amendment said when we looked at the first lot of legislation. What we know is that some people then they're quite sick and they can lose their cognitive ability due to could be from medication, could be from something that happens in the journey near the end of life. Delirium is quite a common problem in people in hospital. And of course, we get then to the thing of dementia. That's for people who haven't yet been able to start the journey on applying for VAD.
What does the VAD legislation in the ACT now have instead of that 12 months till death time frame? And what does it actually mean for VAD applicants in general?
Well, that's correct. That we don't have a 6 or 12-month time to death as all other states do. But what we have is a statement that a person must be approaching the end of their life, and then it says, and this can be more than 12 months. Now, if a person, say, has Parkinson's disease and are suffering intolerably, they may well have a very, very poor quality of life for many, many years. And they may be years away from a clinical death where a doctor would say you're approaching the end of your life, i.e. clinical life, but they may feel that their quality of life is so degraded that, in fact, they want to go now because they have virtually no quality of life left.
Mm.
So the issue is who determines when they're approaching the end of their end of their life, because the act is approaching the end of the person's life. It doesn't. So if a person says my quality of life is so poor that I want to end my life, it suggests that for them they're approaching the end of their life. But in addition to that, the clinician may say, well, sorry, you've got years of life left in you. You just have to suffer.
Mm.
But the Act actually has some principles, human rights-based principles, and it says that the doctor should respect the autonomy of the person in relation to their end-of-life wishes. And another part of the principles say that people should be provided with access to care and treatment which minimises their suffering and maximises their quality of life. Now, the clinical guidelines say nothing about those 2 issues. They're clinical guidelines that were developed by a group of doctors to guide doctors. And that they actually say that a person who is diagnosed with a terminal condition that is expected to deteriorate over a course of years would not be approaching the end of their life. So if doctors follow the clinical guidelines, then that person with Parkinson would just have to suffer until the doctor said, no, you're nearly dead, so we'll let you go.
I'd like to turn now to how all this specifically impacts people with a dementia-related diagnosis. It's important to understand that dementia is a blanket term for several types of dementia, which include vascular dementia, Alzheimer's disease, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontotemporal dementia, young onset dementia, and even mixed dementia. Dementia is a truly terrible and debilitating disease, as we all know, and it's now Australia's biggest killer, particularly of older people. There's massive community support for being able to include voluntary assisted dying for dementia in an Advance Care Directive, but the medico-legal and political complexities are significant. Adele, as a palliative care advocate, what are some of the situations you've seen with dementia patients where the patient had made their wishes very clear whilst they still had capacity, yet because of current laws were denied their wish not to endure preventable drawn-out suffering at end of life?
We do know that people who are have had a diagnosis from dementia and are nervous about how it will impact them at the end of that journey, much more likely to suicide than the public and than the general public. And so there's that difficult thing of people in early stages, and in the early stages you can make decisions about your health care. So they have supported decision making for people in early stages of dementia about their health care. So I can't see why you can't also have supported decision making for people in early stages of dementia. It'd be much better than them having to suicide.
We talked a lot about this, Roy, off air, about how the legislation itself creates a catch-22 for dementia patients, because by the time their condition is advanced enough to meet the criteria, they've already by default lost capacity required to use it. What's your view on what needs to change in the legislation, how to best address that, and how do you think that would work in practical application?
Well, we have a little bit of overseas experience that we can look at. In the Netherlands, for decades, they've allowed advanced euthanasia directives, as they call it. This is actually very seldom used, even for people with dementia. In the last couple of years, fewer than 10 people have actually had an advanced care directive, but over 400 people have chosen to end their life before they lose capacity. Now, there's no really good reason that I can find to explain that, because about half of the doctors in the Netherlands are willing to go along if somebody is given a directive to administer a substance after they've lost capacity. If the approaching end of life was in fact based on the principles in the Act, which says that the clinician should respect the person's autonomy in relation to end of life, then that would actually make it easier for all groups of people to have an advance directive to say, well, at this stage, I want to go while I'm conscious, and if I lose consciousness, I still want to go by a peaceful means. Oh, and the second part, of course, is to make it legal within your advance care directive to have an option of saying, if I lose capacity, then I want to have a peaceful and humane way of ending it by getting access to a VAD type substance.
Same as having a DNR order, do not resuscitate, or anything else. It really should be as simple as that. Adele, do you think that's the case? Can it be solved with something as simple as advanced care directives and enduring power of attorneys?
I'm interested in perhaps doing both. What if somebody did an advanced care, put it in their advanced care plan, plus nominated an enduring power of attorney for this, and then when that person loses capacity, the person who has the enduring power of attorney, then they have the right to say, yep, now's the time. This is what this person wanted. I'm doing it. I was recently, and I think you were too, at the ICEL conference in Brisbane, and ACT Health Directorate ran a workshop on what were the options. Enduring power of attorney, advanced care plan, and I can't remember what the third one was, but really, why can't you put the two together?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't attend that conference, but my VAD Media Watch colleague and representative of Christian Supporting Choice for VAD, Jeffrey Williams, was definitely there, and he has a very special interest in dementia and VAD, as well as much lived experience of it. And he also went to that workshop and walked away saying the same thing. It really should be a lot simpler than this to solve the problem. It is legal in some countries, as Roy points out, and you can get advanced orders, but the numbers are very small. There's been a variety of reasons floated around why that may be. Do you think that would be a problem here? You go first, Adele.
I do think that clinicians are very cautious about acting without having someone at that time showing that they've got capacity. What we do know is that when people have been diagnosed with dementia and are in the early stages, they can make decisions about their healthcare. So why can't they also make decisions about voluntary assisted dying?
What about you, Roy? What's your view on that? How do you think clinicians would respond to it in Australia if, say, we woke up tomorrow and we were able to get pre-approval for VAD or under an Advance Care Directive?
Well, I mean, when you come to think of what happens under Advance Care Directives now, maybe the clinician doesn't have to stop feeding people and swab their mouth as their lips crack and, they develop, fungal infections. So they're actually separated from the real ending of people's lives in that sense. It's the nurses that actually face it. I think that, that will be the point of the citizens' jury or processes that follow it. Because I think it's a matter of getting consumers and the doctors together to talk through and say, well, if you're prepared to allow us to starve ourselves to death and withdraw life support systems, then why not actually have a guaranteed humane end instead of the potential of a really... And I mean, in the long run, doctors are people like us. In the Netherlands, only half of the doctors 40% of the doctors are willing to do it. So, but these are going to be relatively rare occurrences. I mean, it's not... Sorry, just going to say one thing, and that is that people who want VAD do not want to kill themselves. What they want to do is to have control over their end of life so that if things go really bad, they can have a peaceful and relatively painless exit. About a third of people in almost all countries that they keep statistics do not use the VAD substance. But I think it's really a matter of getting the clinicians in the room with the patients and the people directly experiencing it. I'm 85. That's an issue of immediate concern or concern to me in the next few years.
It's not going to result in one extra death, but it is going to prevent a lot of suffering. Adele and Roy, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today. We'll be watching the progress of the citizens' jury closely. Wish you and everyone at Dying with Dignity ACT the best with it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Adele Stevens and Mr. Roy Harvey from Dying with Dignity ACT, talking about the ACT government's recent announcement. They are establishing a citizens' jury to review the issue of terminally ill people who are approved for VAD, losing capacity before they are able to use it. I'm Suzanne James. Thank you for listening to Night Shift.